Welcome in to the Autzen Audibles Podcast, Monday Mailbag edition. I'm Matt Pramer, Eric Scopel on the show. Eric, man, believe it or not, Thanksgiving week is here.
It's crazy.
The last game of the regular season is here. Oregon goes to Washington. They're 10-1 on the season. We will find out as of the start of this recording in about 40 hours where Oregon sits in the college football playoff rankings. We'll probably learn if Saturday's win over USC clinched their spot into the field or if they've still got some work to do to really feel comfortable going into Selection Sunday, which is 2 weeks from this week. Pretty wild. I'm sure the mailbag is full of questions that are built around the playoff, Oregon season, and more. So let's just kind of dive right into this.
Yeah, one thing I did want to note was it was interesting. I was looking at All State's playoff predictor that ESPN puts out, and I sent it to you last night, Matt.
Yep.
Oregon, it says, has a 97% chance to make the playoff, now 89%, even if they lose to Washington. That seems quite high. I'll be honest. Considering how many SEC teams have 2 losses and are lingering, and some of the Big 12 teams that are lingering, it doesn't necessarily feel like if Oregon takes a loss to Washington, they're like basically a lock to make it. But that's what the predictor is saying. I just wanted to lead the show with that for fans. I saw some people saying it feels like it's closer to 20%. I think that's too low. It's probably like 50-50 coin flip if they lose this weekend to Washington would be how I feel. I know those, like the methodology on those predictions are 200,000 simulations, excuse me. So it's not like it's pretty robust. Like they're going through a lot of data there. I find it hard to believe based upon everything we've seen that that's completely accurate right now.
Lose at Washington and 2 Sundays from now becomes probably an uncomfortable Sunday.
Definitely.
Yes. Think we're in. If you're Oregon, you're sitting here going, think we're in. We're probably in, right? But are we in? I don't know. And it's kind of one of those weird dynamics where you feel like you've done enough, but you also haven't done enough to just make it automatic. And you hate that. You leave it almost out of your control. Win on Saturday, and you've left no doubt out there, and you've secured your spot, and now you're just sitting there wondering, okay, do we host a game? Who do we play? Do we potentially have a chance of getting into a bye? Do we need to travel somewhere? Like, those are the questions you're asking, let alone are we in?
I can't imagine if they beat Washington, they wouldn't host. I mean, I have to say, and well, we have a question about this later, so I'll kind of leave it. But the idea of an Autzen Stadium game in December, like, let's make a first. Let's do that. That'd be fun. All right.
How's happened?
Was it UCLA in the bit for the first Pac-12 championship, or what was it?
That was also on that came second. They played Oregon State in the Civil War. I want to say it was 2009 when.
Okay.
I'm gonna look this up really quickly. I think they played in like December 2nd or 3rd. 2009 football game. The War of the Roses. Yeah, War of the Roses was played December 3rd. The Pac-12 championship a couple years later came even later than that. But I think it was Aaron Fentress of the Oregonian when we were walking out of the stadium said or asked if they host a playoff game, would that mean it would be the latest game ever played at Autzen Stadium? And I said, yeah, it would be. And just looking this up real quick, 2011, they played UCLA in the Pac-12 championship game. That was on the 2nd. So 2009 is the latest game probably ever played at Autzen, which is December 3rd.
And if they were to host, it would be 19th or 20th of December. So those would be later. I'd forgotten about that War of the Roses. In the back of my head, I wondered about that Pac-12 championship with UCLA and if that one qualified. Okay, cool. A little bit of history there for the listeners who are maybe wondering the same thing. I think that's been something that's been coming up quite a bit. All right, first one here from @Ryan_Hodges. Can you guys reflect on the dividends now being paid by the depth that this team has versus past eras of Oregon football? I remember a time when a starter would go down, let alone a second string player, and there would be a glaring hole in that position group. Hashtag Autzen Audibles. Thank you, Ryan, for again joining the show. He's asked many questions over the years. It's super impressive what's I hope fans aren't taking for granted the last 3 games in particular. Iowa, where the night before that game, it's like, oh, here go 3 of the best offensive players and a key defensive player. And then the next week, it's like, oh, more key guys are down. And now, like right before USC, oh, the offensive line is going to take a bunch of hits. And then during the game, more guys are going to go down. Yeah, this is different. I mean, I brought it up on the show. I did single out names. People knew what I was talking about on Saturday. There was an Alamo Bowl there where they lost the quarterback, they lost the center, and about as safe of a lead you could possibly imagine was not safe. In fact, it was gone by the end of the game. And I think one thing I wanted to also point out, outside of even the Oregon football bubble, is there's these 2 final opponents, USC and Washington, are also dealing with injuries, and they're not dealing with it quite as well, is something I'll say. Like, Washington loses to Wisconsin. I know weather played a big impact there too. It was a really ugly game, but they did so without Denzel Boston, their big-time wide receiver, without Jonah Coleman finishing the game, their big-time running back, and they just didn't necessarily have the depth offensively to figure things out. Like, Oregon, on the road, crappy weather conditions against Iowa, they're without Kenyon Sadiq, they're without DeCorian Moore, they're without Gary Bryant Jr., without Alex Harkey. Like, those are 4 starters, and probably 3 of those guys are top half unit players on that offensive side of the football. So that really stands out. And then we look at USC this last week. They're down a bunch of guys, just like Oregon. And Oregon was able to figure out a way to score 42 points still. USC didn't have the answers on defense. I'd be curious to see how this game differs had both those safeties for USC been available. But that's kind of the point of this whole thing I'm talking about, is USC didn't have the bodies that Oregon did and wasn't able to do it. So no, I think it's been extremely impressive. Dan has touted the depth of this program for a while now, especially this year. I'm sure he would prefer not to have to have it on full display like he has, but I think it's been really impressive. And this season's been saved because there's been guy, 16 on offense or guy 13 on defense who's been able to step up and make plays when their number is called.
I go back to 2007, and it's a year in which Oregon at one point was the number 1 team in the country. And this was a team that finished far from that by the end of the year. Yeah. They were 9-4 after the season was over. They were 8-1 November 3rd after they beat Arizona State. They were, I think, the number 1 team in the country when went on the road to Arizona 2 weeks later. They lost. They lost at UCLA 16-0, and then they lost at home to Oregon State 38-31. 3 straight losses to close the year. They win their last game to get to 9-4, but injuries depleted that season and derailed probably a national championship from happening. That was Chip Kelly's first year at Oregon as an offensive coordinator. Remember, Dennis Dixon was the star quarterback, was by and far the Heisman favorite before he went down with his injury. His backup would later be rotated in and out between Justin Roper, Brady Leaf, Cody Kemp. We saw multiple receivers in that season go down. I think it was Cam Colvin went down with some kind of leg injury. I remember, I think Garen Strong maybe also suffered an injury that season for the Ducks. I think that was the year in which Jeff Mail was moved from, hey, you're a really good safety, but we need receiver bodies, so you're going to have to go play at receiver now. 2007 is kind of what we're talking about not happening this season. Oregon's a top 5, top 10 team. They've suffered some pretty significant injuries. Mind you, how good has this offense been, Eric? You talked about the machine keeps moving on and it keeps putting up big numbers, even with these injuries. And a lot of the expectations around Oregon's hype, maybe that's not the right word, but just kind of the standard we're holding them to before the year started. We all thought Kayan Sadiq would be maybe their number one target in the past game. We all thought Decore Moore would be a star receiver like he's become. We were hinting on the fact that Dante Moore was going to take a step. And a large part of that was because Evan Stewart was back. He was a projected first or second round draft pick. He's played 0 snaps. And the injury happened after Oregon had an opportunity to go ahead and find a potential replacement if he couldn't play this season. So, yeah, like the depth of this team is as good as it's ever been on paper, and it's starting to show on the field. It backs it up. And you always hear the next man up mentality, and I get that, and every coach says that, and every player says that. But eventually you hit a point where you say it, but you don't mean it. You know there's going to be a drop-off. And unbelievably, Oregon, through all the injuries, hasn't reached that point yet. It's there, but it's just a lot deeper than we probably anticipated it being.
Yeah, no doubt. I've got a small humorous anecdote from that 07 year. I remember that was my freshman year in college, which also tells you how long ago that was. I was at Gonzaga. It was a 9 a.m. Monday religion class. And the teacher, this is a very Washington State room. And the teacher literally opens the lecture by talking about how Oregon wasn't deserving of being the number one team in the country because they lost that game to Arizona. And I raised my hand and had like a whole rebuttal. It got a little fiery to the point where he told me to leave the class. So, so I remember that very, very well. And I remember being like, I don't think I'm going to do well in this guy's class because he disagrees with my which football team I prefer. So that was a lesson. I bet you now there'd be a little bit more Oregon favorability up there, just knowing how the allegiances have changed. But that was a telling part of that time there as well. Was if you stuck your neck out for the Ducks in that classroom, you probably weren't going to be a very popular guy.
Bold move.
Probably a little too bold, but you know, what are you going to ask your boy to do? All right, second one.
Who cares?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it was also, we don't need to get into that. Second one here, kind of on the same line. I thought this was a good way to transition to talk a little bit about this week. This one comes from Duck Fan Dan. How do you think Oregon makes use of all the backups in offense to beat Washington? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. Thank you for using the hashtag. We got most of you guys using it. That does help me find the questions. The good news for Oregon is they've already had success with these personnel. Like, I think the assumption from now is they're not going to get much help at receiver. They seem to have figured something out with McClellan, with Benson, with those tight ends. I mean, Sadiq and Jamari are playing out of their mind. Those 4 guys have really stepped up. I hope there's been enough appreciation. I think you feel okay about that. The offensive line, to me, is a pretty big concern because having done a little bit of Washington scout, having had an hour-plus long conversation with Husky fan Sam, which is, I think, longtime podcast listeners know that's a buddy of mine who's a Washington fan. We talk every week leading up to the Oregon-Washington game. He gives me kind of the debrief, the lowdown. He thinks the strength of this Washington team is its pass defense. And if Oregon doesn't necessarily have its elite receivers out there, that's going to be a lot of pressure on the Oregon run game. And so for me, I have to be honest, I am now kind of highlighting who's available for Oregon on the offensive line because they need to establish this run game. I think if everybody's healthy on the offensive line, and also another thing Husky fan Sam said was Washington's rush defense, not super elite, solid, good players there, but not as good as its pass defense. That feels like an area that they have to be able to establish. And if they're still down, like being down Poncho for this game feels really significant to me. I was really impressed with Charlie Pickard. I don't know if I went back and watched the game Sunday.
Very little drop off.
Charlie like seals a guy for the game winning, like a Keyshawn Silver, who was a 5-star transfer from Kentucky. He's like a 330-pound guy. Charlie gets him moved to the moves him right shoulder, gets him moved to the left, Noah Whittington just runs right behind him for a touchdown. Like, I thought Charlie played really well in that game. I don't think you feel great if he has to play the full complement of snaps against Washington. I think you feel okay, but you certainly don't feel great there. And again, there's been some positive rumbling, I think, about those O-line guys maybe being available. We'll see. But that's where I would get most nervous. And in terms of like, how do you think they make use of the backups? I think that we've kind of already seen the game plan, and the priority here is going to be establish the run game and heavy usage for the tight ends. And that's the saving grace is Kenyon Sadiq missed that Iowa game and hasn't missed more time because there was some rumblings. This could be a longer term deal. He's playing the best football of his college career, of his life right now at the right time. And if you can rely on him to get you 6 to 8 catches for close to 100 yards and a touchdown or two every game, the offense will keep on cooking. I don't have many questions about it, but it certainly feels like he needs to be incorporated. I think you hope like heck you get some of these offensive line guys back.
Yeah, like I look at this and think we've already seen the game plan. It's going to be very similar to what has happened.
Yes, exactly.
And I wonder, beyond just the offensive line, what's the likelihood we get Gary Bryant Jr. back? What's the likelihood that we see Corey Moore back out there? Is that a possibility? I don't know that answer.
I will say, just both were listed as out and not questionable for this last game, and that's kind of says something.
Tough. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if they maybe hit questionable this week, or if they somehow find their way into the college football or into the Big Ten championship game. Maybe they're questionable for that. But I think this program has shown the game plan, and you're right. It's lean into your run game, lean into your 2 tight ends, and then go over the top with Malik Benson, and Jeremiah McClellan's kind of your possession middle guy, and lean into Noah Whittington, Jordan Davison, and De'Aaron Hill, the 3-headed monster that you have at that position. I would feel a hell of a lot more comfortable if Poncho was starting. I still think they win without him at Washington. Helps that this is a 12:30 game and not a 4:30 game where Husky Stadium could get a little juiced up before that one, and there's going to be less time for that to happen. I think it's notable that the line opened up at 6.5, and that's with that's with odds makers taking into account this game's at Washington, and this game is also taking into account Oregon's injury situation. And Oregon, through all of that, is still a 6.5 point favorite, at least opening up. And we'll find out more about this as we kind of dive more heavily into UW. But Eric, I remember I showed you the injury report for UW UCLA, because we were talking about how big Oregon's was against USC. It was even bigger. So Washington is also dealing with injuries as well, and that will also factor in here, because remember, it is the end of November, and there isn't a team in the country that's going to be healthy.
One other thing on this, and then we can jump to the third one. In terms of like game planning and things that they'll do, one thing I noticed that stood out in a positive way for me is I liked the Noah Whittington inclusion in the screen game. Get 4 catches for 22 yards. That was a career high. I think 3 of those were off of design screens where he was basically flexed out as a receiver. I like the idea of just, he is the most decisive, quickest first step of those type of players that Oregon has available. Like, obviously, DeCorian Moore and Gary Bryant are built for the screen game. That was really where those two were, highlighted a lot in DeCorian in other ways. But those are strengths for them. Noah's a really nice fit there, and I thought that worked out really well against 4 catches for 22 yards. A couple of those were first downs down the sideline. I thought those were blocked well and executed well, and Noah was a good fit there. So Noah in the pass game continues to be something to kind of monitor here as the Ducks are down some key receivers. I just wanted to kind of throw that one out here. Going on to the third one here from @big_duck energy. For top players making draft decisions, how much of an impact do you think coordinators taking other head coach openings will impact decisions? And he also wrote here, i.e., if Stein leaves, does Dante declare #Autzen Audibles? It's a very relevant question the day after Cal fires Justin Wilcox, which is Tosh Lupoi's alma mater. I know he'll be attached there. He was already reportedly interviewing for jobs at UCLA and Oregon State as well. It seems like Tosh is seeking an opportunity to be a head coach. Don't necessarily blame him. He's never been one before. He's 44 years old. If you're going to do it, this is the time. Possible they lose him. Will Stein probably feels even more likely at this point, considering what the reputation is nationally. So I think this is a good question of like taking a look at next year. How do we think that impacts things? And I actually lean, I'm not overly concerned just because of the caliber of hire we've seen from Dan. Like when Kenny Dillingham left, the sky fell. They did lose Dante Moore that time, so maybe we see that repeat itself. But they went out and got Will Stein, who's been awesome. And every single position that they've hired for, from an assistant coaching perspective, coordinator or not, I feel like they've hit coaches who've been, not necessarily have to say upgrades, but like Rashad Samples or Carlos Lachlan. I think I know who I like, right? Like they've done a really good job. When they lost their offensive line coach, they hired Alik Terry. He's been fabulous. We probably should have mentioned him more in that first question about how does the depth work out, because so much of that has been him getting all these younger guys ready. So I'm not super concerned about some of that. I think this is a Dan Lanning is here, he'll figure it out type of situation. It might not be every single player, but I continue, and I think we mentioned this before, to hear that there's rumblings that a lot of these guys are thinking about coming back for 26 who are draft eligible. And I'm sure those conversations are including like, hey, Tosh might be gone, Will might be gone. Nothing is set in stone, but like they're still thinking that way in those terms with the knowledge and understanding it's possible that their coordinators aren't still here next year. What do you think, Matt?
I look at this and say, we've already seen this happen. Bo Nix had a decision to make after 2022. Do I go pro or do I come back in 2023?
Yeah.
And Kenny Dillingham had left. Will Stein had been hired. A conversation was made between the two, the coach and the player. Nix felt comfortable and returned to school. So
yeah, good point.
I think it's a factor. Yeah, 100%. That will play a role, but it also plays a role what you talked about. What if Evan Stewart says, you know what, like I could probably go get picked in the 6th round without playing this season, but if I come back, it changes things for me. Or what if Poncho comes back and says, man, I was very adamant about being going pro and this being my last year back in August, but I really want to experience a championship, or I really want to run it back, or whatever the reason being, and he returns. And Dante Moore looks around and goes, yeah, the offensive coordinator might change, but the guys I'm playing with won't. That factors in as well. And then there's the different story here is, now I think Dante Moore's case, if he went to the NFL after this season, he'd get picked in the 1st round. It's tough to argue going against 1st round money, but college athletes are now being paid. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Alex Harkey did not walk on senior day.
Pretty sure I didn't see him.
That's a case in which he could fight for an extra year of eligibility because he's eligible for that if he wants it. And he will make more money at Oregon and as a senior through NIL opportunities than he probably would make as a late round draft pick in the NFL the following year. And so I'm real curious to see what Division Street does, what the school does from its $20.5 million they can give out in rev share, and also what Oregon's athletic department and football team can do in terms of generating other opportunities through NIL for its athletes. Do we see Oregon kind of go all in this coming off season like Ohio State did a year ago to ensure all these guys come back and you enter 2026 as a proverbial number 1 team in the country? Because I think if Dante Moore comes back and Mateo comes back, and Tatum Tuioti comes back, and Dylan Dinneman comes back, like this team will be ranked preseason number 1 or number 2 next season.
Ohio State, depending on how they could return a lot, and they may be a 2-time defending national champion. But I agree, like Oregon has a chance. 26 has a chance to be really special if this all works out. And the question will be, and I'm not saying it's a sure thing they lose both coordinators, but there's definitely some smoke that it's possible. Question will be, how quickly do you hit the ground running with those coaches? It's been really impressive under Lanning. Like, do people realize like Junior Adams isn't here anymore and the receiving core is down all these guys, and yet, hey, guess what? The receivers look really good still. That was the hire that was made this offseason that goes under the radar, right? Like, that's another name we should probably be kind of highlighting in terms of under the radar secret kind of heroes for this season. So no, but I'm with you. There's a chance, and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because Oregon's a chance to make a run in 2025.
This year.
Right.
Yeah.
But 2026 could be a big year. Break, Matt?
Yeah, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll answer the last 2 questions of the show. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Thank you for listening, submitting your questions. 3 down, 2 more to go.
All right, going to this one here from @Dylan A. Hoffman. What is one under the radar storyline you are following as we end this year with the football team? I've got one where, like, if the radar is right here, I'm like I'm in Japan. Like, I'm so far off the radar. Like, it's. But
so right here is Eugene, Oregon. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. Right here was Eugene, Oregon, and right here was Japan. I was thinking something as far away as possible. Like, it's just not even in the same. We're like 9 time zones away. I wanted to highlight Nasir Wyatt as a pass rusher. Again, this is so under the radar, so something that probably people don't care about. And maybe I'm sorry, Dylan, if this is not the type of answer you were looking for, but he's a true freshman. He's played. I was just pulling this up here. He's played 23 snaps all season. Those snaps, he is graded as the second best player on Oregon's defense, 84.2 defensive grade. Pass rush grade is the second best, 83.3. When this kid gets on the field, and we saw this against USC on Saturday, when this kid gets on the field, he is so dynamic and so explosive. I know he's 6'2", 230 pounds, but he played 4 snaps against the Trojans. He had 2 quarterback hurries. He had 1 quarterback hit. He was contacting Mayaba on the interception to Obadegwo in the first half. Again, I know this is not a huge deal. I don't expect, like, if you look at his snap counts this year, 4 was a season high. He's played between 1 and 4 snaps every time he's seen the field. Like, he's not somebody who's getting massive run. But in those 23 snaps, he has 6 quarterback pressures. He has a sack. He's been very, very consistent in terms of just beating guys with speed rush. Not saying he's a massive impact player, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if you get to certain matchups and you're starting to see it even now, where he just kind of low-key makes impacts on plays. So again, that's majorly under the radar. It's not something that has massive bearings by any means on this season's success. I just think he is somebody that I'm paying attention to, that every time 32 is on the field, I'm like, okay, what's he going to do? And every time I'm watching him, it seems like he's beating his guy and at least getting around the quarterback before the ball is thrown, or in the case of Saturday, getting to the quarterback as the ball is thrown.
I like that one. It's very difficult for a guy to excel when you step on the field or the competitive court or whatever your arena you're stepping onto, and everyone knows why you're out there, and everyone knows what's coming. And this season he is a pass rush specialist, and everyone knows what's coming when he steps on the field, and yet he still executes. He still does a really good job. He's able to make plays and make his presence felt. Pretty damn impressive. So I like that one. I'm going to go. This might be a little too far or too close to the sun here.
Okay.
But Oregon might have 2 future first-round draft picks at tight end.
I like that. Yeah.
Obviously, Kenyon Sadiq being this year's version. Jamari Johnson has served most of the year kind of as a primary blocker. And when the injuries at the receiver position started mounting up, we started seeing them lean into using both of them on the field at the same time. And that naturally led to Sadiq having to be playing more of a traditional wide receiver role and Jamari getting more of the traditional routes for that Sadiq was normally getting. And he has kind of flourished the last 3-4 weeks of the season. Dating back to Rutgers, I guess that's 5 games now.
Yeah. Since the Indiana loss, he's been really impactful.
The Indiana loss, he's caught a pass in every game. He's gone. He hasn't scored a touchdown, which is strange. But he's out there. He's had big catches. He's had big moments. He's had athletic plays where he's getting downfield. His blocking has been really good. I wonder, like next year, if Sadiq leaves, which he should, because he's a first-round draft pick, Jamari Johnson will slide into that tight end 1 role at Oregon, and I wonder, like, could he position himself? Because he is a big dude. He is every bit 6'6". It feels like 230, 240 pounds.
He listed at 255.
Oh wow, he's even bigger than I thought. And the way he moves, he's gonna be an NFL dude at the next level, I think. And it may not be after 1 year, maybe it's 2 years as a starter. He established himself in that role, but I just look at Jamari Johnson and think you'd love to have Kenyon Sadiq back. He'd be a game changer for you. He'd certainly make you better. But I'm not going to say Jamari Johnson's going to be as good or better, but Oregon will be fine with Jamari Johnson being your tight end 1 going into next season. And I don't know if we felt that way going into the year. We felt like, hey, they've got a stud at number 1 guy, but everyone else behind him is a big question mark. And certainly there's maybe talent on paper, but production on the field is lacking. And Jamari Johnson has turned into one of those guys.
When he transferred from Louisville, because people forget, I think he was injured the back half of that season. I think he played like 7 or 8 games, had decent production. But the conversation from the Louisville 24/7 guy when I reached out was like, they were really bummed to lose him because the upside here was immense. And they felt like he was just about to kind of break out. And it took some time here and it took some injuries here. And going back to our first question about just the depth, like Oregon's probably not still a 1-loss team, doesn't go 5-0 post Indiana to this point without Jamari Johnson's contributions. I think that's a great one. In fact, it was back to my conversation with Husky fan Sam. You know, he was gushing about Kenyon Sadiq, and something he said was, if Sadiq wasn't at Oregon, he'd be my favorite player in college football because he's so much fun to watch. I was like, have you watched the other tight end? He was like, no, I haven't. I was like, let me tell you about this guy, because he's like 6'6", 255, and he's going to run probably like sub 4.5 in the 40. And they use him in the screen game, and he's just an absolute menace. And he's like, oh, that doesn't sound great, because linebacker is a position where Washington's pretty deep, but a little undersized and a little bit less experienced, I think, for the most part. That he has been just a godsend for this offense.
I have another one.
Ooh, go for it.
Tatum Tuioti might play himself into being a first or second round draft pick. He has gotten better every single year in his time at Oregon. If he's a first round pick, it's probably going to have to be after his senior year. But
that seems high right now to me.
Yeah, he's having the year though that I think everyone kind of envisioned Mateo to have. And that's not to say I'm not trying to say Mateo is having a bad year. I actually think he's having a really good year. It's just teams are scheming from him, going away from him, throwing the ball quickly where he can't get to the quarterback to create some of the statistical accomplishments that we would expect out of his position. I think Tuioti is having a type of year that statistically everyone kind of thought Mateo was going to have. And I think he's playing himself into being maybe I'll change it. Maybe not a first or second round draft pick, but just a bona fide NFL guy. Like this guy will get picked no matter what, whenever he comes out, whether it's this year or next.
I think, there's no question he's elevated his status. I mean, 11 and a half tackles for loss right now. You're right. That's the kind of production we were expecting to see from Mateo. And I think the thing that's really impressed me with him is just he's a jack of all trades now. Like he was primarily, even though he's a tiny bit undersized early, he was kind of more run defense centric as a player. He's got some stuff in the bag as a pass rusher where he is impacting passes every game, even if he doesn't get credited with a sack. So I love that one. I've been on the Tatum's outplaying Mateo bandwagon for a long time now. I don't even think there's really a debate which one's been more impactful. And I agree with Matt, though, that to Mateo's credit, and he played his best game, I think, in a couple months over the weekend. He was great against USC. I hope people realize that and go back and you watch the game. You even notice his contributions and kind of his impact even more. But Matt's right that teams have highlighted him as the player to eliminate from that front. And given how talented all the other guys around him are, that's freed up the success we've seen from an Amari, a Bear, and certainly a Tatum. But I hope people don't, because I saw people suggesting like Mateo's been a bust this year. Is he playing hurt?
Yeah.
I don't think any of that's true. I just think it's a case of like sometimes the production doesn't find you. He still has 8.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. It's not a terrible season, but considering what, like I predicted preseason, I think that he could set the season sack record at Oregon, which I think is like, I think it's 13. Yeah, it's 13. Because last year he had 10.5, so it didn't feel like a huge leap to say he could get like 3 or 4 more this year. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but I don't think it's been a year that's like a complete bum year. I think he's played pretty solid throughout, just not the type of production we expected to see from him.
He's in the top 20 in the Big Ten for sacks, and that's notable. That's not like, oh, you're having an unbelievable year, but that's notable. Like
he led the conference last year, so being 20th is a step back without question, right?
He's tied for 16th. There's a bunch of dudes tied for 16th. But I think the message here is that he's still like one of the more productive players in the conference in generating sacks. He's not your typical guy. He's in the top 20 for tackles for loss as well. This is Mateo. He's just the focal point of defenses, and he has to now take that next step of becoming the player where, hey, everyone's coming after me, and I'm still going to be able to dominate. Or maybe, part of the case, maybe to defend Mateo here for a second, is maybe Oregon's playing into that. Hey, Mateo, you are going to generate a ton of attention. Embrace that, and that's going to free up other guys, and we're going to scheme around that expectation.
He's still the Big Ten's number 9 graded edge player. So, and his actually his PFF grade, and I know mileage may vary. That's my every single time. His PFF grade is actually improved to this year. He's at 78.9 overall with 75.5 last year. Pass rush is up from 76.7 to 79.3. He's already surpassed the number of pressures he had last year, although he's had less sacks. So some of the indicators there suggest like this is not a drop off. In fact, maybe he's actually playing a little better. It's just the counting stats haven't caught up. Okay, finish with this one. I thought this was just an interesting conversation that I know a lot of the fans are having right now. And some of what happened last year has, I guess, skewed or impacted perspective on this. And I thought it would be fun to kind of talk this one out, Matt. From @RobbieParnes, he asks, where do you guys stand on the chance to play for a Big Ten championship game? Most seem to want to skip it and rest, but the amount of rest/rust seems to almost be equal between both options. The first round bye after a championship game versus a first round of playoffs after UW. Why not go for the title? I'll let you go first here because I'm curious on your thoughts. I don't think we've really talked about this. Where are you at? Do you, in a perfect world, if Michigan gets it done against Ohio State, Oregon goes back to Indianapolis and plays on December 6th, are you feeling like this is perfect, this is great, it sets Oregon up for postseason success, or are you feeling like that ends up being kind of a hindrance?
I have a hard time. I'm a very competitive person.
I know this about you.
So I have a very hard time going against the idea of, hey, there's an opportunity for a conference championship. You can go win a ring, but we're gonna pass. We don't want that opportunity. We don't want the opportunity to go on the podium and raise a championship and be able to take all the spoils that come from that over your peers for the next year. Um, I understand the wear and tear that it could present for your team going into the college football playoff. I think there's a lot of other issues with the rankings here than just getting to a conference championship or not winning a conference championship. I also think last year's example isn't going to be the case every single year. Ohio State was absolutely insanely good. I understand that. Had to take a freak upset for them to drop at, all the way down to that spot, and they lost the second game then, which put them in that position. I think that the way Oregon lost that game leaves a weird taste in our mouths about, do you want to be in the Big Ten championship game or not? But I have a hard time walking away of wanting to compete for some kind of championship to get more rest. I acknowledge, like, hey, like, yeah, like there are certain number seeds that you want to be in. Like, if you want to be in that 5 or 4 spot, because you get a really easy first, is it that air quote wise, first round playoff game, or you play a weaker opponent, and we could see a conference championship team drop a little bit down to from 4 to 8 when they're reality more like a 4 or a 5 team. That could set up some issues for a 1 seed, but ultimately I land on, if I have an opportunity to go win a championship, I want to take that opportunity.
The thing you just touched at the end there is my concern. I think Oregon, I can't imagine a team plays for a Big Ten championship game, enters with 1 loss, loses a second time, and gets left out. I also wonder, is there a weird scenario where not only do you not have a bye, but you end up like not hosting or something like that? Like how does the committee handle Oregon if they lose to Indiana for a second straight time in Indianapolis? Which, by the way, playing Indiana and Indianapolis for a Big Ten championship game, it's going to be quite the atmosphere. That I'm sure that fan base is going to turn out in an incredible fashion. It's going to be really fun to kind of see. So that would be the concern I have, because in Robbie's hypothetical here of first round bye to the quarterfinals of the playoff, that's 25 days. I just did the math on this. That's 25 days from Washington to the opening week of the college football playoffs. That's 20 days. So you actually, in theory, if you do get the bye, you get a little bit more rest. So that is something to acknowledge. But if in theory you don't get the bye because you lose the Big Ten championship game, I think you're still going to be in. I can't imagine they're like, sorry guys, didn't get it done. But in that scenario, you end up having a 13-day rest. You go from December 6th to December 19th or December 20th, depending upon which day they choose for you. So you get 2 weeks off as opposed to 3 or maybe 3.5. So that is in the calculus for me. I think ultimately I'm with you, Matt, where if Oregon can start its Big Ten run by winning consecutive Big Ten championships. You said hello a moment ago to Indiana and the kind of crowd they're going to have. Hello to the conference in terms of Oregon's like just showed up and wrestled the way supremacy, at least within the conference race, back-to-back years in a conference that has produced the national champion the last couple of years. So that would really stand out. I also say, and I get this perspective, Oregon's done the Big Ten championship thing. Let's go win a national championship. I think that's where a lot of the fans are at, and they're just trying to find the best path to it.
Sure.
I think you brought up a good point, though, that because of how skewed last year was and just how disappointing it was and how everything played out, I think a lot of fans have decided we don't need that Big Ten championship game. Let's set up for a national championship. Let's let's play in the first round. Let's avoid what all happened there. The reality is you're playing an extra game though. If you don't get the bye, like getting the bye in this hypothetical that Robbie sets up, that's a significant thing. It's not just that you have a little more rest. You have fewer games to get to the finish line. Obviously, Ohio State proved last year you can do it. I also think everybody would acknowledge you'd rather only have to win 3 times rather than 4 times in postseason play if that's possible. So I'm with you. I think I ultimately land like if Oregon, like if it's a possibility to make the Big Ten championship game and play for a Big Ten championship, sign me up for that. And if there's a possibility to earn that bye, I still think I'd rather have that bye, especially because they fixed at least some of how this is going to play out in terms of who gets the bye and how they're seeding the rest of it. So, like if Oregon is a Big Ten champion, they're at worst probably the 2 seed.
I was just gonna say, like, there's incentive for Oregon to get to the Big Ten championship game and then go and win it to give yourself a better chance of a better draw in the playoffs. Because let's just go through this scenario, right?
Yeah,
okay. Oregon, Ohio State has to lose to Michigan. So that happens, and Ohio State drops down probably to where right around maybe just above where Oregon's at right now. But
they'd probably be a 5, right? Something like that.
Yeah. Let's say the SEC has A&M and Georgia playing against each other in the conference championship game. Texas Tech is playing BYU. The ACC is not going to be in contention for any of these spots. They will get a team in, but they're going to be at the bottom. So Oregon beats Indiana. They climbed. Let's just assume A&M beats Georgia. I don't think that would happen, but they're undefeated. They're the higher ranked team. Let's just use that logic. A&M's your number 1 seed. Oregon becomes your number 2 if they beat Indiana in the college football playoff. Indiana becomes your 3 seed, which would set up a potential third matchup.
True. Yeah.
Down the road if this plays out, which would be awesome. You get Texas Tech probably at 4 for winning their conference championship in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Georgia probably slides down to 5th, going into the college football playoffs. So if you're Oregon, hey, you just dodged Georgia because you're the 2 seed. Ohio State probably sits at 6 going into the college football playoff.
I think Ohio State would have a case at 5, which would be the preferred outcome. If you could be on the other side of the bracket from Ohio State, I'm sign me all the way up. Even if they lose to Michigan, I still think that's the best team in the country.
Sure, I agree. Ole Miss becomes probably 7, and that's who you're playing if you're Oregon, more than likely in the Rose Bowl. Ole Miss has to travel all the way across the country, 2-week notice. Their fan base is going to be jazzed up, but is Lane Kiffin the head coach? What's their, that dynamic is just strange. Oklahoma probably is probably your 8 team, maybe Notre Dame being your 8 team. We'll see there. But I think there's incentive for Oregon to get to the Big Ten championship game and wanting to get there and then going out and simply winning it, because what's their ceiling if they don't? Like, what if Oregon beats Washington and Ohio State beats Michigan? Oregon's probably playing at best for the 5th spot in the college football playoffs. And there's a real chance you're playing, to your point, hey, you want to avoid Ohio State as long as possible. There's a real chance you're playing them before the championship game. And you want to avoid that as much as possible.
It's going to be fascinating to follow. I do think there's a decent chance if Oregon beats Washington, they're the 5. I actually feel like that makes a lot of sense. And to me, if that's the final outcome, even though I'd prefer Oregon has a chance to play for a Big Ten championship and possibly secure a bye, being the 5 seems pretty fun. And home game at Autzen in December, hosting what could be like Alabama or Notre Dame or somebody of that caliber. Maybe even if you're the 5 seed, you're more likely hosting that group of 5 team. Yeah, Tulane or North Texas or James Madison or somebody. Either way, that would be a really fun outcome. The end of this is basically doesn't seem like either really has a ton of negative connotations in terms of just like positives come from either. But you got to beat Washington first. You've got to beat Washington. The worst outcome is Oregon doesn't make the playoff because it loses to Washington, which again I think is unlikely, but certainly possible. Or you're on the road there and you're playing in a crappy weather situation across the country against somebody that is really fired up, and you're going to have to pull a rabbit out. Not saying they couldn't do it, but you'd much rather have door A than door B in that case.
100%. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. A little programming note. We'll be back probably on Wednesday. It's a short week with the holidays. Media schedules change a little bit, so we're going to be back probably on Wednesday with a game preview because, quite frankly, Eric and I and John, we want to enjoy Thanksgiving just as much as you guys do. We don't really want to record a podcast on Thursday.
We're such jerks, gosh.
So yeah, we will have a game preview show go live before Thanksgiving, but until then, go to duckterritory.com for more coverage. And you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.